In this episode, we're going to talk about assessing your family screen time. We're going to take a look at screen time use from maybe a different point of view. So much of the focus has been on what kids and parents are doing online with their recreational or entertainment screen time. And that's an important topic. But when someone is plugged in, what are they not doing? What are they missing? So in this episode, we're going to take a look at screen time from the perspective of a day in the life of a healthy child. I want you to imagine a pyramid with 24 triangles, and each triangle represents one of the 24 hours of the day. That is all the time we get each day. So how do we use it? If you think about a day in the life of a healthy child, as a general rule, kids get somewhere between, young children especially, 10 to 12 hours a day. Some kids might get an hour less, some might need an hour more, but it's roughly half of their day is spent with sleep time. And then what does the rest of the day look like? Let's just assume that it's not a school day, but it's a weekend, or it's a summer day, or a vacation day. If we use this pyramid, we can also imagine this is a little bit like the food pyramid. In fact, that's where I kind of got the idea. So I want to borrow the concept of the food pyramid. And when you think about the food pyramid, for those of you that remember it, all the healthy stuff is at the bottom. And at the very top of the food pyramid, there's this tiny little triangle that represents the things that we need a little bit of, not a lot, just a little bit, fats and sweets, right? And at the bottom, all the healthy foods. The reason I like to use the food pyramid as an analogy is because fats and sweets are at the top. And when you think about it, what do kids really like to eat? Well, many kids would really like to have candy or ice cream or some dessert, and that's great. I like those things too. But we generally don't have ice cream for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. We usually have to have a meal first. And imagine your child kind of thought and expected that it would be okay to have those things all day long, and that was probably what they would prefer over, healthy foods like fruits and vegetables. So what would that look like from a health standpoint if your child was having, instead of a little bit of that dessert, that treat toward the end of the day after they've done the work of the day, where they've had their meal, the things that they really need. And similarly with screen time, if we treat it like a dessert, it's something that they would earn after they've done the work of the day, done all the things that are so important that I just mentioned: thinking and problem solving skills, physical activity, social emotional skills, and recreational and helping skills. Those are the things that kids really need to focus on, and that can take 10 to 12 hours a day. So when we think about screen time and where that fits in our lives, it's not the most important thing, as in it's the thing at the top of the pyramid, but it's the thing that we probably need the least amount of if we want to have a healthy life. And so what fits in the middle is all that sleep, because we need a lot of sleep. Many kids need, like I mentioned, 10 to 12 hours. But what goes on during the rest of the time? It's things that I would describe: learning thinking and problem solving skills, engaged in physical activity, learning social and emotional skills, and finally, learning recreational and helping skills. And so throughout the entire day, whether it's a school day or a weekend day, kids are doing those things when they're not sleeping and when they're not plugged in. And again, we only get 24 hours in a day. And so if your child has 1 to 2 hours of screen time, that means the rest of the time, somewhere between 10 and 12 hours, they're doing all those other really important things that are helping them build life skills. And if they're spending 6 or 7 hours on screens each day, they're doing less of something. And what is that? Is it cutting into their sleep time? For those of you who have teenagers or pre-teenagers, you perhaps have experienced that. Or is it cutting into those other things where they're just not as physically active, or they're not hanging out with friends, or they're not hanging out with their siblings, or they're not doing their chores, or they're not involved in other activities like riding their bikes or shooting hoops outside or playing at the playground with neighbor friends. They're not engaged in those kinds of activities when they're plugged in. So give some thought to how much time you or your child are on screens for recreational or entertainment purposes. 1 to 2 hours is usually enough for children, and it happens to line up with widely accepted guidelines. Just a little bit goes a long way. So what is not happening when kids are plugged in? Is it cutting into sleep, homework, chores, physical activity, other forms of play, social interactions? It may help to keep track each day for a week or so how much time your child is plugged in and also how much time you're plugged in. If you decide that maybe it's time for a change, there's an episode on activity menus for managing screen time that may be worth listening to. A link to the free downloadable copy of A Day in the Life of a Healthy Child graphic and worksheet can be found in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope this information added to your growing toolbox for parenting your children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.